I've got three scenarios of actual events that brings to bear the nature of the ethical challenge that local government faces at a very simplistic level. Before I do so, I want to acknowledge Ntombi Barth. Yes, courage and resilience is how we survive in government, but not all officials and senior managers have the, shall I call it, the psychological and psychosocial tools to navigate extremely complex and demanding environments. And I think that leads me to the next point with Adam Bogatso's, in his comment, raises the very complex issue of what I called conditional ethicality. If I am acting in a corrupt and fraudulent manner to put food on the table, when we get into the space of conditional ethicality, Chair, that is very dangerous grounds, because then we can begin to create the circumstances that would justify and warrant behavior that we think to be contrary to the values and vision that we have as members in the space. So let me get to my three scenarios. I hope I've acknowledged the people that I just wanted to. So I want to give you three real life scenarios, right? I'm going to go through them quickly so that people understand. I'm not going to disclose in which municipality or in which province this took place, but this was all on my watch. Scenario one, an electrical team responds to a power outage. While they're on site, this is late at night, some of the workers were there with the work vehicle, those with the duly authorized work vehicle with all the necessary equipment, and two individuals arrived in private vehicles to be able to exercise the necessary oversight. They returned to the depot on completion of the task. As they sign out, obviously the work vehicle is returned to the depot, the private vehicles are leaving. As the private vehicles leave, security does an assessment, and in the assessment, they discover undisclosed cable in the vehicle. Now, for all of you who know about electricity, cable theft is a sickness in institutions, and obviously until the Second-Hand Goods Act is enforced with extraordinary punitive measures, scrap dealers and the like are going to continuously get away with it. So what was the ruling, colleagues? So it's not explicit theft, is it? Because the staff member claims, I was on a job, I was responding to a power outage, I had inadvertently left the leftover cable in my vehicle. So we introduced a concept that is not theft. It was called unauthorized possession, and we changed the staff policy to allow one strike rule. You're allowed to have unauthorized equipment and or materials in your vehicle once. Because, when you do it the second and the third time, then this is no longer unauthorized possession. This is attempted theft. So to my colleagues, there's an indication of how ethicality and ethics standard can be allowed to shift to allow for circumstances, but not in such a manner that people can then act with impunity. Scenario one. Scenario two, the traffic testing department always had a group of people randomly hanging around outside the facility. The complaints would come in that there was fraud and corruption, but we had no way of proving it. So on one given day, the municipal manager arrived at the testing station and said, Harlan, you are testing these 10 individuals. I'm unilaterally withdrawing you. We're going to allocate another testing individual. So we say, okay, replace Harlan with Zolani. What do you think happened? All 10 persons who were scheduled to do their test drive with Harlan refused to take their test with Zolani. And when you've got 6 testing officials and you see a pattern, what happens? You start to immediately question, why are these people always hanging around outside, and why is it that when we cancel at short notice, that those people who were supposed to be tested, because theoretically, colleagues, if you're there for your test drive, it's irrelevant to you who the testing official is, isn't it? You presume that that testing officer has the necessary capacity to ensure that you get a fair test, regardless of who it is. So we noticed there was a relationship, but there was no proof and there was no evidence to demonstrate that there was any, that we couldn't close the loop on the evidential loop to be able to take actions against them. So what did we do? Well, we introduced CCTV cameras outside so we could track who was there on a daily basis. And we introduced random testing. The chief traffic officer, previous one, was dismissed on other grounds. A new chief traffic officer, random testing was introduced. We couldn't take any action because there wasn't sufficient proof and sufficient evidence. And our legal advice at the time was that to take a class action against all of them would not have the desired outcome. What was the consequence? There were a lot less incidents at the traffic station. The unintended consequence, there was a lot less revenue coming into the city officially as well. So you want to act with ethicality, you can also have an unintended consequence on your own institution that you end up taking less revenue because, believe it or not, there was some form of complementary relationship in covert activity and your own official activity. The third incident is there are two that are similar. So this is in a case of diesel theft. The parks truck breaks down while engaging in parks for activities. We had introduced a no tamper policy. Once your vehicle breaks down, whether it's a traffic vehicle, a tractor, a truck, whatever the case is, whatever the issue is, if the vehicle breaks down, you are supposed to call in the workshop. You're not supposed to tamper with the battery. You're not supposed to tamper with the fuel, because ostensibly you should know whether there's fuel in the vehicle or not. During the course of the response of call out from the workshop and getting to the site of the tractor, 50 liters of diesel evaporated. And I use the word evaporated because we couldn't account for what had happened to it. So we assessed that, okay, during that hour and a half it took for the call-out vehicles to get to the truck, 50 liters had evaporated. There's no proof of theft. There's no demonstration. There's no affidavit to say Zolani was the driver, Harlan was the assistant, and Anton was on the back of the truck, and therefore they colluded to steal. Because if 50 liters disappear while you have staff responsible for it, theft is implied, right? So we had to use gross negligence because we couldn't prove theft. If while you are standing next to the vehicle that you are responsible for and 50 liters automatically disappear, even though I can imply theft, I can't prove theft, but I can prove gross negligence. You couldn't prove that the 50 liters of diesel had fallen out the back of the truck or that the tank was damaged or anything, but 50 liters had disappeared. We won that on appeal. They were dismissed. So in one case, we had a strike rule. In one case, we couldn't take any action, but we introduced measures. In the third instance, we could because we could imply it and so forth. And then my last one, just very quickly, is introducing devices and gadgets for water and sanitation that manages overtime, materials, and job cards. And what have we seen? Significant reduction in waste on materials, significant reduction in overtime, because staff no longer make use of material or paper, they make use of gadgets. So the introduction of technology to improve processes and systems. And so, colleagues, just in closing then, so, a lot of what we say has an esoteric feel to it. But when you sit in the space in local government, all of these esotericness is reduced to decision making. Because if you don't put in the right policy amendment on undisclosed, unauthorized possession, because you don't want to be overly punitive, so you introduce a one-strike rule, so it's not outright theft. You introduce technological changes by bringing CCTV cameras outside the testing station on gadgets for those who are responding to water and sanitation, electricity outages, so that you can track that it's 2 hours of overtime, not 4 hours of overtime, because by the time the paperwork is completed, the actual facts are lost, although we won't get into the fact that maybe it was only supposed to be 2 hours of overtime, but we were looking for more hours and there was no way to manage it. So these 4 scenarios teach you that the practical ethics is a daily activation and a daily action in local authorities by virtue of these types of decisions. And so in closing, I mean, we all are called upon to manage our resources more effectively, to make the right decisions under sometimes extremely difficult circumstances. And I think it is up to us, those present here today, to keep this as at the forefront and to be ambassadors for this kind of behavior in all of the spaces that we occupy.